Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone. My name is Paul Young, and I'm going to walk you through what's going on with the utility sector and power generation. Here's my agenda. I'll talk about key stats, I'll talk about ESG and utility sector, talk about cybersecurity, and then I'll close the loop with some my thoughts around what's next and what needs to happen as part of the overall transformation of the utility and power generation sector. Here's a bio about myself. I'm a CPA, CGA. I have over 35 years experience between financial reporting, analysis, business processes changes, automation, as well as we're deploying over 300 day AI solutions. Here's some energy stats here. Now this is for Australia. What it tells you is the bulk of Australia's power is still generated by coal. They're moving more and transitioning to solar and green and other options. There's even discussions of nuclear power. This is look at Canada. Canada generates nearly probably over 82% of their power from clean sources, with the bulk of being hydro and nuclear. They have grown their solar and wind sectors, but there's challenges going forward with that in terms of having the right balance of policies and the viable technology and cost affordability around those areas. The U.S. has done significant a lot of conversions around moving coal to natural gas. That's why their emissions the previous years have gone down significantly, just because they have moved to less. Like coal is so CO2 intensive, they moved to natural gas is less intensive. This gives you an idea of key countries. I do this particularly to focus because the energy sector has become a hot potato because you have a lot of major utilities and you have local distribution in terms of how you manage your power sources or power grid because you're purchasing and then you have it all along the supply chain, which I'll get in more on the ESG side, but this gives you kind of some insight. Now, if we look at the top priority utility sectors around ESG, they're going to be the greenhouse emissions, it'll be biodiversity, and it'll be indigenous relations, health and safety, and their overall corporate and social governance. Emissions are critical because if you look at the utility sector, it generates a good chunk of the emissions that they look at in terms of sector's contribution, and also plays a vital role. Without energy, you can't produce goods and services. You don't have energy to support residential, commercial, industrial uses. So it's critical to have the right policies, and I'll get more into that as we move forward through this slide deck. So if we look at the targets, this is from PricewaterhouseCoopers. It's looking at their goals by 2050. There's been some pushback in a lot of areas right now due to the fact that it's all about viable technology, its cost. You're talking with utility sectors where they have to spend billions upon billions of dollars to build new capacity or convert, and that capital has to be recovered to user rates, whether that's industrial, institutional, commercial, or uh, residential. So it's critical that they also, because of the way their energy flows, they basically they'll produce energy at a plant. There's and then that energy gets consumed by a manufacturing facility, and that energy is purchased as part of that. So it becomes part of the overall supply scope 1, 2, and 3 supply chains, with the priority being scope 2 and 3. You cannot have a discussion with the utilities or any sector without strengthening the governance model. That really means listening to your employees around health and safety issues, listening to them about diversity within your board of directors, and just the overall, your fiduciary responsibility in terms of your energy sector. That, like a lot of organizations I've seen over the last year, do significant amount of contribution to the community, also look at how they mitigate things. So there's lessons to learn from fires like what happened in Hawaii in terms of crisis management and the overall organization and public and social, the social and corporate governance to drive better solutions that mitigate potential fires and threats, fire and water potential that could bring down the grid, and that brings into resiliency. This talks about technology. The biggest issues with utilities is the grid itself and then the data. It's pulling that data together and then managing that data on a consistent basis. So most of the emphasis right now on the reporting cycle is on an annual basis, but I've always discussed with clients and prospects that the culture needs to push that down to the operational management reporting cycles to drive out those policies more clearly. And that starts at the top end of management buy-in and then pushing that down. The key is, like anything else for utility sectors, is balance. And the key is like I said earlier, the to convert or build a new plant that's nuclear, all that, there's a time frame to get approval in there. There's a cost of capital, and you have to recover that capital through rates. And there's just the overall managing of cost. Because if you're a publicly traded company like Tennessee Valley or Pacific Gas and Electric, and part of your shareholders are government, part of it are institutional, then the criticality here is that you want to make sure that whatever changes you make, they're done in accordance with your ESG strategy, but they're also driving, ensuring that you have the capacity and your profitability is still there, and you manage rates accordingly. The challenges I see, the cost of moving to green technology, especially when it's still in its infancy stages, is concerned. Like, we're still talking issues around virtual power plants and using like lithium and other battery storage capabilities to basically manage off-peak and on-peak time for direct energy consumption, and that's critical of driving the challenges to manage this. Data AI will play a role in that in terms of balancing the loads and just doing things. That's one key issue. The other is the complexity of this data in general. Just if you look at what they're looking at in terms of that data and pulling together, it's going to require a lot of data modernization. It's going to require a lot of work around how we pull that data together, how we, I call it staging that data in terms of a database or architecture that allows you then to consume that data through business analytical tools like a OneStream, planning analytics, or other tools out there as part of streamlining the process. You want to keep energy affordable because that's critical. And that's really what you're trying to do, is to do the adoption of this, but also keep it affordability. And you cannot get around without talking about, there's still a lack of ESG global standards. Most of the emphasis has been on the climate change areas, the emissions, but over time you're going to start to see stuff around water reporting, around facilities management, around HR, social governance, all the other key pieces of the ESG reporting cycle. That's critical. And I cannot say that I also believe that the utility companies probably need to establish committees, and inside those committees should also have third-party involvement, including government people, as well as environmentalists, indigenous groups, and other people to help set policies that make the most sense. Can't talk about the utility sector without talking about the threat of cybersecurity. We're seeing more and more of these attacks happen, and the key is to ensure how you protect your resiliency of these from these attacks and stop ransomware or any sort of event that can cause some significant financial or other challenges for a utility. Now, the critical I always discuss when it turns with cybersecurity is make sure your systems and your policies are up to date. And I also encourage, not on an annual basis, but on a quarterly basis, bringing in a third party doing a security assessment. Because sometimes you can't see when you do certain things. It's easy to look at it and say, well, I don't see issues with it, but it's good to bring somebody in to do an assessment. And also, if you have internal audit department, to work with them accordingly as well. What's next? Well, I think we're in an era where we're starting to see movement towards sustainability, but it's still going to its NPV calculation, return on investment, to make the most sense. ESG is starting to be driven more down to the operational culture. So it's starting at the top level and it's going down to a lower level to drive more changes in the organization to become an ESG organization. There's also challenges, like I said earlier, pulling the data together and getting the mandates right, and some collaboration is critical. And building resiliency in the grid is a top priority as well. We've seen outages happen from storms and all that, but how do you get back up? And like I said, updating your policies and software to mitigate cybersecurity. And then, like I said, driving overall ESG is part of your overall economic value to your shareholders. This is additional information how you can reach out to me. I basically write a ton of blogs in different areas, doing a lot of analysis. I still heavily engage with clients and partners and everybody else around data, help companies transform. So if I can help you with your journey, feel free to reach out to me. Thank you.